Give us how it would work, how technically it would work.
Basically, how it would work for every person who works for a business. Half of all businesses in the United States don't have a retirement plan. Businesses, person who works there would take 1.5% from their salary, match it 1.5% from their employer's salary. The employee would decide which fund it would be invested in, and the fund would follow them, so it would be easily importable across state lines. They could invest in a private fund like Fidelity or State Street or the federal government's TSP system. And then when they retire, they would get a monthly paycheck for the rest of their life. If they make under $4 a year, they would get a refundable tax credit, so it wouldn't come out of their paycheck. And we've tested that thanks to the American Federation of Teachers, and 7% of Americans like that idea. And what people want is something that half of Americans have a IRA or a 401k, or defined benefit plan, pension, which is a terrific retirement system, and we want to make sure that the other half of Americans get one as well.
Ms. Weingarten, you tested this. What did you test? What did you look at in consideration for this program or this idea?
So, about when the session started, there were a whole bunch of rich folks who started fighting against pensions for everybody else. We saw in a lot of companies when they close, pension plans go bye-bye, or pension plans got frozen. So the plan that a lot of people who were baby boomers or before relied on was Social Security and a pension plan from the company or teaching or things like that. And what we realized several years ago as the AFT, we put together a retirement security task force. And we need to make sure that teachers and nurses have retirement security, but we actually need to make sure everybody has retirement security. Our kids' parents, our kids' grandparents have security. And so we've been on this track with Kathleen for the last 5 or 6 years. That op-ed, we've been pushing this idea together, but we wanted to make sure that the public was with us. So last year we did extensive polling, online focus groups, things like that, to find out if where people really were. And in some ways, just like when C-SPAN retirement security a few days ago, and phones ran off the hook. What we're saying is this is a silent crisis, because people see as they get to 40, oh my God, what are we going to do? And so the polling we did showed that over 80% know they needed retirement security. It keeps people up at night. But then we tested this idea that in addition to Social Security, if you contributed and your employer matched it, if you don't have another pension plan, you contributed some, your employer matched it, and we put it in a guaranteed account. So it's recession proof. You know it's there. You can see it. It's your money. That it then acts like an annuity on retirement so that you can take from retirement.
So does this only apply for organizations that don't offer some type of savings plan on their own, such as a 401k or a 403b or the like?
What we're trying to do is require that every employer has something, and but we don't want to take from what people already have. This only requires federal legislation. And this is essentially what happens in Australia. It happens in other places as well. But every employer, if you don't also, teachers have to find benefit plans. A lot of them, and so you get a formula that then, at the end of your career. 401ks are whatever you put in, what the employer matches, but it goes up and down, and the employer controls it. This is let you, the employee, control it. The employer puts in a 1.5% or 1.5%, and then it grows. And you control it, you see the fund, That's on top of Social Security. And when we tested that idea, basically 3/4 of Americans, older Americans, younger millennials were even more because they understand it because of the student debt crisis. But what Kathleen just said about the depth of this crisis is half the people in America have not saved a penny. And so they're relying on Social Security, which frankly may be lower in 20 years from now than it is right now. Many of us will fight to keep Social Security, but people need more than Social Security.
You invite the callers to ask questions of our guest. If you are an employer and you have an employer retirement plan, 202-748-8000 is the number to call to make your thoughts known. If you have no retirement plan, guest talked about, 202-748-8001. If you are retired and you want to give your experience, 202-748-8002. You can also reach out to us at C-SPAN WJ. What about those employers would say, I can't afford to set up something like this if they don't have something already in place? You're asking basically, are you required, and essentially if you're requiring them to do that?
Well, it's only 1.5%, so they'll get a tax deduction for 1.5%, and I don't think most employers could afford that 1.5% out of their gross income. That's what we've discovered, we've looked at, and that's what we've seen. They can afford that. Look, in Australia, they've implemented it, and every employer in Australia is required to contribute 9%. And Australia has one of the most great economy going in the world, which they've done for the last 25 years. They implemented this, they enacted this 25 years ago. They now have about a $4 trillion retirement fund. They're the 20th biggest country in the world, and they have the 4th largest pension fund in the world. People call it their super. So they're so proud of their retirement fund. I suggested that to Randy, that we call it she said that wouldn't go over well in New York because they're supers, they're superintendent in New York, they're very irritated with the supers, they don't pay attention. But the point is, a much smaller country, Australia, was able to do this. They started at 3% on all their employees, which is half of what we're requiring. Which is twice as what we're requiring, excuse me, and they've grown it to 9%. So if Australia can do it, I think the United States can.
And what has happened in Australia is that conservatives and liberals alike love it. This is cross partisan lines because it affects everybody. And let me just add one more thing in terms of what you just said of businesses. We also have a study that shows that for every dollar a retiree spends, there's more than $2.75 of economic impact. So in all of these areas in America where small businesses need to thrive, as we have the aging of America, if retirees actually had money to spend, then you'd see it spent on Main Street. Then you wouldn't have this terribleness of, do I pay for rent? Do I pay for the prescription drugs I need? Or what is happening in a lot of America right now, which is like my generation, is the sandwich generation with our aging parents and our kids. We need to find a way to say to people who basically have the country on their shoulders, we understand you have a right in retirement to have a decent life. And this is a way to do this in addition.
Our guest talking about the idea of guaranteed
Yes, can I just say on that? Can I add something to that? I went to a college campus, and the kids said, "We don't save for retired expenses." Then I explained the GRA plan to them, and I said it's 1.5% from the employee and 1.5% from the employer. And the student said, "No, that's too low. Be 5%." And I said to them, "But you just said you couldn't save." They said, "Oh, well, if you make us save, we'll save, and you should make us save 5% because we know we can save for retirement." So they were all in. And I went to another college, and they were 100% for this because they said, "This is our money. We know what to save. Help us save. We really like this idea."
Let's hear from Arlington, Virginia. Mike starts us off, gets employee retirement through his employer. Mike, you're on with our guest.
Good morning. My question is, there are Roth IRAs and IRAs available for people even if their employer doesn't offer a plan. What about just responsibility and telling Americans to take ownership for your own retirement? What about that factor?
So there's a lot of people who actually, look, we talk to a lot of people. There's a lot of people who actually don't even have the ability to enroll in these things or have a bank or that kind of stuff. What we're actually saying here is that the employee should own this as opposed to the mutual fund or other things that now exist in federal law. We're actually making this employee driven and having an employee and an employer match. And the other piece is this. We're to all the funds that want to get in on this. You're going to have to actually guarantee the contribution. You can't put people into risky ventures, which they don't actually really earn, and then say, oops, we lost all that money. So that there's going to be real responsibility on everything and everybody. But yes, the employee has the responsibility of 1.5%, but it's the employee driven as opposed to Wall Street driven.
Let's hear from Michigan. This is Marilyn, who's with us.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to know, this seems like something that is going to eventually replace Social Security.
Absolutely not.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, I do.
I know, but what we need to do this on top of Social Security, and we're very, very clear.
I
So,
realize
yeah.
that is what's going on right now. The problem with that is that they have been trying to get rid of Social Security for a long time, telling us that the funding is not going to be there for the next generation. And I think that this is probably the answer that they're going to come up with, that you have to save for your own retirement. 1.5% is a great deal of money. Believe me, I know, because I got into my 401k early on. But what I want to know is, how are you going to roll people in that have spent their whole life on welfare? How are they going to be able to manage?
Caller, thank you. Ms. Townsend, you want to take that?
Well, if they've been on welfare and they haven't worked, then they wouldn't be eligible, because this is for people who have worked. I mean, that's the easiest answer. They're not, this is for workers. So I hear that there are two questions here. One, does this replace Social Security? And the answer is absolutely no. As you can imagine, my family has been working on strengthening and working for Social Security all our lives. Number one, we believe it's extremely important to have Social Security. Protects all Americans. And Social Security helps people who can't work because they've been disabled, or because they have, like Paul Ryan, they're orphans. So Social Security is a much broader, strict program than retirement loan. We need Social Security, and it needs to be strengthened. And a lot of presidential candidates are saying that this year. That's number one. But half of Americans are lucky enough to also have a retirement plan. And we think that the other half of Americans also need a retirement plan. And that's what we're working for. And we need them to be able to save as well, and to be able to be part of the half of the Americans that are able to save and have something saved for retirement. We're making it easier for them to save. We need a 21st century savings program that is portable across state lines, that follows the employee rather than the employer, because people now change employers much more quickly than they did in the 20th century. So what this plan will help to do.
If you're asking people to take responsibility for these plans, how do you plan to educate them to make sure they're making the right choices?
That is a really
Well, what you can do is you can do it what they do in Australia, which is you can default them into a very good plan, and then if they change their mind, they go into a plan, but they can be defaulted into a fund. And by a fund, it's not like a 401k. It's a fund. It's a diversified fund, more like a pension fund, because those pension funds, if you have a lot of people in the pension funds, like the TSP, like the federal system, has very low fees, and CalPERS or CalSTRS or the New York State Fund, which is 105% funded, which is what we want, is a very well diversified fund. And so that's the kind that you would want to default people in at the first step, which is what you do in Australia. You're defaulted into a fund, and then if you don't like that fund, you can get out into something else.
So, I mean, just like what Kathleen said, we have both been to Australia. We've both talked to the people who are in charge of these funds. And some of it, as you could see from your callers, some of it is about trust and about fear. And what we've seen across the country is that people who work, sometimes small businesses that say that they can't afford things, it costs a lot of money to set up an IRA. And basically what you see in terms of IRAs and Ks is basically, it's about a third of the businesses that do it. So what this is to say to both business and individuals, we're going to make sure that these funds in the United States, like teachers' retirement systems, all these other funds, actually, which are professionally managed with pooled assets, and as a result, really guarantee that you have the funding and tell you what your accounts are in plain English, that these folks will also take responsibility and want to take responsibility for these assets. So the default position, if you defaulted, I hate that word, if you didn't make a decision, but somebody put you into the big federal pension fund or the big teachers' retirement fund, you would actually see your income every year and you'd see where it grew. And then if you went from Arizona to Colorado, you would take that money with you. You changed employers 5 times, you take that money with you. So it is actually lifting up the responsibility of everybody. But to the other caller who said, what about Social Security? They're not just Kathleen's family. This is part of what the union movement is about. We will fight like we did, each and every year to make sure that Social Security for everyone. But it's not enough to ensure retirement. I'm going to say it again, half the people in America, people who work their lives, they don't have retirement, and we need to change that.
Let's hear from Steve in Massachusetts. Hello.
Hi, thank you for taking the call. Apparently, this is nothing but economic eugenics. Do you know the word eugenics? Since, the descendants of communist fascism are here, this is basically another hack job for the fruit. See? You see how they hang up on me?
Steve, go ahead with your question.
Nobody's hung up on you, Steve.
Okay. The question is, you're going to keep repeating the same Ponzi scheme where we got enough money to send hitmen to other countries like Venezuela or people of color to overtake and take their resources, but we don't have any kind of money to take care of our own.
Okay, Steve. We'll go next to Sherry. Sherry is next from Minnesota. Hello.
Hi. I have a big question. I'm retired. I'm on Social Security, and the government has been raiding that fund for years and years and years to where it's not going to be solvent. What is going to change in this? As soon as there's money built up in the account, the government will come in and take all that money away from us, and all the money that we've paid in all these years, it's going to be gone.
Okay, Sherry, thank you for the question. Ms. Townsend, you start.
Well, first of all, the government won't take your money. This will be owned by you. It could be managed, let me just say, it could be managed by State Street. It could be managed by Fidelity. It could be managed by Legg Mason. It could be, or by CalSPERS. In other words, you will choose who it will be managed by. The government will have no authority or no ability to take that money away from you. It's your private property. So the money cannot be taken away from you. That's number one. Number two, it is not true that the federal government has taken the money away from Social Security. I know you get that idea from, but that's just not the case. We can get into that detail. That is a false narrative, and I don't know who's been spreading that narrative, but really not true.
What happens, ma'am, is that Social Security was always a pay-as-you-go system, and that actuarially, since people live longer, thank God, that it actually costs. If you said today, what amount of money do you need in Social Security so that today everybody forever? That's a big number. And what the government hasn't done is it hasn't funded the present value of that number right now. Let me just tell you again, look, somebody could have made that same argument about 401ks, about other kinds of things. What we're trying to do is ensure that the people that are not part of the 1%, people who cannot actually put $400 together for an emergency, that they actually have a route, a path to supplement Social Security with this kind of private property as private responsibility, as Cap says, that they put in 1.5%, their employers put in 1.5%, and you can carry that everywhere.
If such a program existed and someone needed to get into the account for an emergency medical bill or anything like that, would your program have that flexibility?
So you could create, you can create a program against that program. We have,
maybe I'm wrong.
Our first iteration was not to do that because people need to save for retirement, but these
This is pretty adequate for me.
And Ms. Townsend, you on Twitter says the problem with these savings plan is that the money saved never keeps pace with inflation or the value of a dollar, so that it becomes inaccessible for emergencies before withdrawal, and it winds up not being enough anyway due to the rising cost of living and dollar value. How do you answer that?
Here's wood. If you say it's mattresses, then that's fine. And it's no.
Well, the idea that this is going to be invested, and the investments should be able to keep in place with inflation, and that's the idea of investments. And that's the idea of being in a fund, because in a fund, you should be able to figure out what is the best way to that investment should grow. So some days it will be in stocks, some days it will be in bonds, some days it will be in commodities. And that's the idea, that you have people who are professionals who will have large pots of money, who will be able to invest at low fees.
From Philip in Michigan, you're next up. Hi.
Whatever.
Hi, thanks for C-SPAN. I was offered, I work for Culture in Indiana, a really nice company, fast-paced trailers. They offered the 401 the matching funds, and I just said no. I want to be in complete control of my money. I was making good money. I want to be in complete control of my money. I became disabled in '91. I broke my back. I got disability, and when I just recently got retirement, and I'm living on like $800 a month, but it's working out fine for me. But my point is that until we start charging these big guys that got all this money that aren't paying any taxes, the president right now, he gets a big kick out of it. He doesn't pay any tax. He's got all these lawyers and stuff. But the deal is the little guys just need to be making more money rather than what they are. Today, during the real world, they can actually pocket more money and put some money in the bank. The local company here, that's a plastic company, they sold to another company. All the people in the company had their money invested in the insurance pension plan. Well, the new company moved in said, well, we can't afford a new pension plan. We're going to close down and kiss your pension plan if you don't take our new offer. Well, they kissed the insurance plan goodbye, and they took a new offer, and the company's still in business. But it was George W. Bush that spent all my Social Security money. When he went to war and gave all these giant tax breaks, killed off the $3.5 trillion that Clinton created by taxing the large fat cats, that's where the money went, and it was 2/3 when I looked it up, and it's even archived on C-SPAN.
Okay.
So you're right that we have, that United States of America, there have been preferences made to enrich people who are already rich. And you're completely right about that in terms of all these kind of tax cuts like that. What Kathleen and I are talking about is how we actually have federal law prioritize other working people, rich fat cats, that we actually prioritize and have something in federal law that say you take 1.5% off pre-tax dollar before you get taxed. And the employer does too, but you drive it, my friend, so that if you're 40 years old or 35 years old and you somewhere, you then make a decision as the employee where that money goes. And what we are talking about, because we both have worked in these fields a long time, that if you invest them like Australia does in professionally managed pooled assets, then the fees are much lower. Pay the fees. You're going to pay very little of that, and your money is going to go and be invested and grow in that kind of way in a place that's reliable and not going to lose if Wall Street goes down 1,000 points. All of a sudden, your investment earnings are shot.
From Joseph in New York. Hello.
Yes, good morning, ladies. I've been thinking about something, but this program is like rolling the third on a three-legged stool, which once this country really was the way we were secure as elderly people. So since the stool, third leg has been knocked off, we need to grow a new one.
Exactly right.
So,
Thank you.
What I look at. What I look at is as invested properly, and so there's plenty of good mutual funds will index, and I'm sure the smartness of where you people are doing investment actually bring a good yield along with a possibility as the project gets launched and gets sold to the right people, possibly the candidate, the president to pick up on this, or a president that comes in, and the employee
Who do you think you are?
may be able to contribute a tad bit more.
You better back up, back.
For the employer right away, that's going to be a lot of organizing. But
You better back it up.
there's a way to go here, and I do appreciate what you're saying.
Okay. Thanks, Colin. Ms. Townsend, you want to take that?
Thank you. Well, thank you. I mean, you're right. What we do is have a number of the candidates say this is a critical issue and that we do need to have answers for how we're going to solve the retirement crisis. Candidates adopt this proposal. So thank you very much.
Let me follow up with both of you with a question from Twitter. This is Lisa Pate, who asks, if employers already offer a 401k and 99% of those employees are participating, will they be affected by your proposal? Ms. Townsend, you want to start?
They probably will not be affected by this proposal. Basically what we want to do is cover the half of the employers that don't offer anything. If you already offer and people are taking it up, then you won't be affected.
This is really about this is about ensuring that more people have the ability to have retirement security. And most often, the people who need are the ones who have the least access to it. So there would be, so for people who have already defined benefit plans, sorry to use the mumbo jumbo of these words, but for people who have defined benefit plans, defined contribution plans, and the employer would show that he or she is already doing this, and that employees already have that, are already doing the contributions, then this would not substitute for that. This is supposed to be additive and supplemental. Sorry, Kathleen.
Yeah, no, that's right. And just to tell you who doesn't have those kind of plans, like 40% of Hispanic women, 40% of African American women work for companies that don't offer plans, retirement plans, as compared to about 80% of white men who do work for companies that do offer those plans. So there's a real unevenness about who gets to have retirement plans and who doesn't. There's an inequity as to who works in such companies. So that's part of the challenges that we face.
Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
So we want to make sure.
Serves as the retirement. I'm introducing you, and she serves as the Retirement Security Director for the Economic Policy Institute. We're also joined in studio by Randy. She's with the American Federation of Teachers, here to talk about the guaranteed retirement account. How did you come together on this? Because you represent teachers. You work for EPI. How did you come together on this initially, Ms. Montgomery?
So I have been, and Kathleen has a good story about this, but like the caller that talked about the three-legged stool, we fight every single day to have people have a better life. Remember, I represent 1.7 million people, virtually all of whom work in professions, nursing, public services, professors, teachers, guidance counselors, who can make a difference in the lives of others. So we are embedded in communities all across America. And what you see is that people want to take responsibility. They need a decent wage. They need health care so that they're not one pre-existing condition away from it. And they need to make sure that they're okay in retirement. And so we focus on not just the retirement of teachers, but how do you create retirement security for all? As a lot of people were focused on, on Medicare and Medicaid and health insurance. We said, no, this is a silent crisis. And so we've been doing a lot of work within the AFT on this, and Kathleen actually heard me give a speech on this one day about the number of African American women that have no retirement security, the number of Hispanic women who have retirement security, and what do you do when you're 62 or 65 years old? And so, Kathleen, you finish the story.
Yeah. What happened was I was working for an investment management firm called Rock Creek, which is actually, as you can imagine, headquartered in Washington, D.C. I was out in California at a conference, and I heard Randy Weingarten give an incredibly passionate speech. And I said, oh my gosh, I had been the lieutenant governor. I'd worked in investments, and I didn't know the statistics. I was shocked. I thought, here I am. I was in public policy, I was in investments, and I didn't know how bad the situation with retirement security was. If I didn't know that a lot of Americans, although they may be worried about the retirement, they don't know the whole picture. So I thought I would love to work with Randy in solving this problem. And that's how it started. And I called her up and they said, I would really like to work with you. And luckily, I'm now at the Economic Policy Institute, and Rock Creek is still very much involved in helping out, as is, I have to give them credit, Teresa Garibaldi at the New School and Tony James from Blackstone. So there are a lot of people who have said, this is a huge issue and we've got to solve this issue. And we're gathering support across the country to solve this problem.
Tony and Teresa wrote a book about this. I mean, there's starting to be a bunch of people that are getting together around this issue, and a lot of your callers, the fear because things have been taken away from people so much is a legitimate fear. And part of what we're trying to do is say there is a solution. It starts small, but if you actually had these GRA accounts in addition to the kind of retirement security plans you have right now, and in addition to Social Security, you would get three-legged stool that the caller was talking about. And we would protect people who have spent their lives helping America. We would protect them in their retirement.
This is Shelby in Florida.
Yes, good morning, and good morning to the two ladies whose life and work speaks for them. And this topic that brings to us this morning speaks to our need here for Holy Week, that we are looking at the brotherhood of man, the context of bringing together the collective common good for our people. Now, the AT represents teachers, professional academician myself, husband physician, children now in medical school in their 30s. So I think I have a 90-year-old mother who is a part of a retirement stream in healthcare. So I think I have a good understanding of a generational understanding. The Economic Policy Research Institute brings to almost for me every day an email that I read to bring about current event and discussion in the classroom for the higher ed, PhD, MBA students as it relates to this matter. As we know, women, particularly as Ms. Townsend Kennedy stated, are the recipients right now whose life was lifted out of the poverty index because of Social Security. We too have men who look at a society that right now here in Florida, we have bills being put forward as we are in legislative session across the nation. Sometimes this is actually a local, state, and federal partnership that has to come together. We just did taxes on Monday, whereby most people put and able to put $6,500 into an IRA that would in fact give them the opportunity of a savings account.
Okay, good. So thank you for that. We'll let our guest respond to that, Ms. Weingarten.
So, look, I think the and you know, this is Holy Week and it is Passover, and I happen to be married to a rabbi, but I do believe in what Luke says. Too much is given, much is required, and we do have to have in America. We started this with the New Deal, some safety net that requires personal responsibility, but also enables people to live their lives. And, you know, this is part of that kind of safety net. It's like when people have a pre-existing condition that happens, and we need to ensure that people are safe and are not bankrupt because, you know, someone in their family got cancer. And this is a matter with retirement security. If you work for a small business that couldn't afford a defined benefit plan, or couldn't afford all the fees and everything else in terms of creating a 401k, this would be a way through federal law to ensure that everyone had a safety net that was Social Security and a GRA.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes, I'm actually in Florida, as you can tell, my mother, who just turned 91 yesterday, and I'm here with one of my daughters and 3 of her children. So I see the generations together and the idea of one another. But the whole idea of bankruptcy that Randy just mentioned, you know, right now we have the highest bankruptcy rate among seniors ever in our history, gone up 5 times in the last couple of years. And why is that? Because, thank goodness, we're living longer than ever before, and as a result, don't have enough to live on. We've got to rethink retirement, reset retirement, and make people feel that they can breathe easy about it. And that means systematically changing what we do, and that's what the GRAs do. They say half of Americans don't have anything in retirement. We've got an answer. Let's implement that answer. Let's make sure, and it helps just not only the seniors, it helps young people know that, they can take chances, they can do things because they don't have to worry about retirement. I mean, when you talk to young people about how they're going to grow old, they're about it. And why not let them
Hello,
know that they
Mike.
can say
My name
that
is
that's going to be there
TJ.
for them, that that's going to be there for them, and that their children won't have to think about things. I mean, you can see, now that we have 4 generations, this weekend living together, it just makes things a lot easier.
Let's hear from North Carolina. This is James, says he has no retirement. Good morning.
Yes, I'd like to comment on the 401k and the IRAs. I worked for a company in North Carolina for 12 years. When the company shut down under the NAFTA and went overseas, and they penalized everybody 25% right off the top, and the government came in behind that and swept up the rest. And I'd like to know what they could do to stop the companies from doing it. Thank you.
So look, some of us are actually fighting to ensure that this newly negotiated NAFTA, the president negotiated, actually has enforcement provisions to it, that you don't have a promise without any kind of remedy, because of those very same things you talked about. I was in Lordstown, Ohio on Sunday with Bernie Sanders, because we're saying to GM, retrofit that plant and don't move the jobs to Mexico. You made $11 billion last year. Do those kinds of things. So I agree with you. We have to actually do more to have made in America, mean made in America. We need an industrial policy to do all of that stuff. But what we're talking about here, that a company couldn't do that with the GRA. It because it's your money. At the moment that you start putting in the 1.5% and the company puts in the 1%, it becomes your property right. It's different than a 401k or things like that is owned by the company and then given to you. This then becomes yours. And that's one of the differences, and that's part of the reason it is portable.
From Patricia in Minneapolis, also says she doesn't have a retirement plan. You're next. Good morning.
Actually, I do. I'm calling in on the Republican line. I do. I started my IRA back in the 80s, and I also saved and stayed out of debt. I usually never agree with these, but I don't see anything wrong with this idea. I think it's a really good idea. However, I think the teacher should have been teaching this in school, and I really the job that the teachers' unions and the teachers are doing with our kids. They aren't teaching them history. They're focusing on social issues and justice, quote unquote, instead of teaching them the basic things that they need to succeed. And I wish the Democrats were more like Mrs. Townsend's uncle. John F. Kennedy. He cared about taxes and America, but Bernie Sanders will destroy the healthcare system and the financial system in America. An absolute disaster.
Okay, that's Patricia in Minneapolis. What about this idea of fiscal literacy amongst the young?
I'm actually giving a speech tomorrow on issues that I think, Patricia, you would probably agree with me on. People actually need the freedom to teach the things that really matter to kids, as opposed to the focus on testing. And frankly, there's been a fixation in the last 10 years of just focusing, frankly, on math and ELA, as opposed to giving us the authority so that we can actually teach history. Now, there are differences in terms of how you teach it, but I totally agree with you that we need to have fiscal financial literacy in high school, frankly, middle school. We need to give people the confidence to understand money and understand choices. And this is, again, something that shifts by class. Rich folks have this. We need to ensure that people who are in the middle class or people who are aspiring to the middle class and what better way of doing it than to do it through public education. I completely agree with you on that.
Let's hear from Henry in Massachusetts, in Boston. Hello.
Yes, I'd like to comment on the lady that called about the government taking money from Social Security. And the two guests denied that occurred. Well, the fact is that the government borrows money from Social Security, and that they pay very little interest rate because the Feds have the rate set low. That, they hardly any payback. So I support that lady. They do take money from Social Security to fight wars and stuff like that. And in the past, they used to call it war. You could buy war bonds, and then they changed it to savings bonds, which paid very good interest for people and with investment. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you go, Kathleen.
Well, I would just say so what Social Security does, they do get treasury bonds, which means they get an interest rate. If you had Social Security invest in the stock market, which some people have said they should as a whole, they might get better returns, and that's an argument. But and some years they'd get much better returns, and some years, like 2008, they get worse returns. A huge question, which some people want to engage in. But getting it from the treasury bonds, they get maybe 2% a year, which is better than getting per year. And I think you would prefer that Social Security get at least a 2% return rather than nothing per year. So I think that's a.
No, I was going to ask both of you. There's been a long-standing debate on Capitol Hill about preserving Social Security, at least making sure it's preserved for those future generations, changing the ages and things like that. Are those things that you would advocate for, Ms. Weingarten? You go first.
So personally, I think that the cap should be lifted, so that there isn't a cap that says that you pay up to $130,000 of your income or $148,000 of your income. I think that basically it should be a progressive. You should pay up to whatever your income limits, whatever your income is. And I think that would help enormously, and that would be fair. I think you can't, but the point I was trying to make is there are many of us, all the callers that raise the issue of Social Security. Social Security is a government program started by Francis and FDR. And it is one of the few government programs that it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, you actually trust that it's important to have, and that's a really good thing. And so there are those of us who are fighting to keep that promise alive for successive generations. And that's what we're trying to do. But I hear in the questions the fear that somebody's going to take it. And I want to just say to all the questioners, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Green, that's part of what the union movement does. We fight to make sure that it stays there for everyone. And that's part of what we're trying to do in terms of this GRA plan. We're to make sure that the people that don't have retirement, except for Social Security, that they actually have, a little bit more so that they can live. And 50% of them.
Ms. Townsend, same question to you about Social Security, if it needs to be restructured.
Well, I definitely believe that we should raise the cap. I mean, it struck me as so weird when I was working and I learned that my taxes went down when I made a certain amount of money that's larger. I think it's definitely we should raise the cap. And I also think that you could tax income. Why are you just taxing from work for Social Security? I think you could tax income from other sources for Social Security. That's not probably necessarily. I'm talking EPI. I'm talking for myself. But my father thought that we should tax other sources of income for Social Security. I mean, So I think that there's a broad-based way we could raise income from Social Security that would be more fair.
We'll go next to Susan, and she's in Massachusetts.
Hi, I'm going in late to work today. I'm just so excited to call in to this particular subject. I've been a contractor most of my life. I'm now in a full-time job where I do get my pay, but it's almost like too little too late for me. But I have a couple points, and I'll be brief. One, I just want to circle back to the caller from Minnesota. I couldn't agree more that the school the schools did abandon building into the curriculum from the earliest grades. I think this should start in elementary, building in the dog thrift and delayed gratification. We've drifted into a society where those values are just not taught by families, and they're certainly not taught by the schools. But here's the thing. that I worry about with the 401k system, because I have a modest 401k. It's so low, I'm embarrassed to tell you the amount because it just makes me cry. But what I don't like about the 401k versus defined pension systems, if you can raise those accounts over and over again, and money out with pretty low penalties. And so I think that's why we have a crisis, is that it's human nature is you don't want to think about setting rules. You don't want to think about the future. You live in the moment. Certainly in America, that's our value system. But we do have an Armageddon upon us. I agree. But the 401k system just had too many loopholes for not forcing people to stick with a saving program. And finally, I am a conservative, but I love Kathleen Townsend. I'm a native Marylander, going back 16 generations, and living in Maryland when she was lieutenant governor. Great honor for me. She was a great public servant.
That's Susan in Massachusetts. Ms. Townsend, you can start first.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And there are a number of challenges with the 401k system. I think that once we get the GRAs up, it will show us that there are different ways to reform the whole retirement system. But first of all, we need to help those half of Americans who have nothing saved. And the whole retirement system is going to change as we grow older, and we're going to be working part of our lives and not working part of our lives. And so I think you raised a very issue, and thank you so much. And thanks for your compliment.
Ms. Weingarten.
So I agree with you. Kathleen was a fantastic lieutenant governor, and it has been an honor with her on this project. But I also agree with you that we have to, try to think about what should be taught in elementary schools that create community, that create responsibility, that create critical thinking. But what's that? More and more and more responsibility is laid on schools, and we instead of pretend that that's not happening, and then teachers actually have all the responsibility. We should have wraparound services around schools. We should focus on the well-being of children. We should have this kind of work in terms of financial literacy so that kids know from the earliest ages how to deal with money, and it feels so elusive. But this becomes something that we have to work through with, unfortunately, that whole big, schools bureaucracy up and down the line. But I agree with you that, and with the COLA from Minnesota, that financial literacy is really important. And sometimes, actually, then if we teach it in a way that people feel confident, kids could actually then help their parents.
We'll hear next from South Milwaukee. This is you're on with our guest. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
I wanted to discuss with you. I'm C1 and disabled. I've had 95-year-old parents to deal with. I have a personal retirement for myself that I've scrapped and saved and sacrificed for. But one of the things that's concerning me at the moment, even the amount that I have saved, is the cost of these retirement facilities, the assisted living, are $10,000 a month. I would not last 5 minutes with that kind of pricing, and it blows it's mind-boggling to try to understand what pile of money that would come out of. And that's my biggest concern. Like I said, I'm 51 and I'm disabled, and I have a good amount of money set aside, but not for $10,000 a month.
Okay, thanks, caller. Thanks for sharing that with our guests. Go ahead.
Look, this is the anxiety, and thank you for calling. This is the anxiety that you hear when you push at this issue, where people are very scared about what's going to happen in terms of retirement. And, you know, sometimes we kid, like, you know, I kid my nieces and nephews that, you know, you're going to have to take care of me. But this is a real fear that there is not enough money in the world to pay for working folks, to pay for assisted living programs, home health care, all of these other things. And so what are we going to, so when Kathleen talks about how long-term we're going to have to deal with aging of America and not actually say that the millennials and the Gen Xers who are now being strapped with student loans themselves. What will probably happen is that if we don't deal with this as a society, using government to do that, then what will happen is our newest generation, the Gen Xers, are going to have to pay for all of us. And that's fundamentally not fair. We have to find a way to solve these problems.
Our guest has been for the last hour, Randi Weingarten of the American Federation for Teachers. She serves as their president. Also, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, who serves as the Retirement Security Director for the Economic Policy, as well served as the former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland from 1995 to 2003. Ladies, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, we'll have a discussion about aspects of Campaign 2020 with Rob Smith, who's a Republican strategist. A recent op-ed of his takes a look at Mike Pence. He served in the Iraq War and also serves as a contributor for Turning Point USA. That conversation coming up next.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
C-SPAN's newest book, The Presidents, Noted Historians Rank America's Best and Worst Executives, provides insight into the lives of the 44 American presidents through stories gathered by interviews with noted presidential historians. Explore the life events that shapes, challenges they faced, and the legacies they have left behind. Published by Public Affairs, C-SPAN's The Presidents will be on shelves April 23rd. Pre-order your copy as a hardcover or ebook today at cspan.org/thepresidents or wherever books are sold.
Once, TV was simply 3 giant networks and a government-supported service called PBS. Then, in 1979, a small network with an unusual name, Big Idea, let viewers decide, all on their own, what was important to them. C-SPAN opened the doors to Washington policymaking for all to see, bringing you unfiltered from Congress and beyond. In the age of power to the people, this was true people power. In the 40 years since, the landscape has clearly changed. There's no monolithic media broadcasting has given way to narrowcasting. YouTube stars are a thing. But C-SPAN's Big Idea is more relevant today than ever. No government money supports C-SPAN. Its nonpartisan coverage of Washington is funded as a public service by your cable or satellite provider. On television and online, C-SPAN is your unfiltered view of government, so you can make up your own mind.
Washington Journal continues.
Joining us from New York is Rob Smith, is a Republican strategist, also serves as the spokesperson for the organization Turning Point USA. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Your recent op-ed takes a back and forth that's been going on in the news lately between the Vice President Pence and the candidate Mayor Pete Buttigieg of Indiana. Could you talk about why you wrote this?
Yeah, so I wrote the op-ed, and when I talk about the op-ed, so as a part of my duties for Turning Point USA, I went to a conference in Chicago. And as I write in the op-ed, as a gay man, I was a little unsure. As a conservative, I was thrilled. But Mike Pence is going to be, Vice President is going to be the speaker. And I had to unpack why I felt so uncomfortable with going to an event where the vice president was a speaker. And so I realized that I believed that Mike Pence was an advocate for conversion therapy. And I wanted to unpack why I believed that. So I did my research, and what I found when I did my research is that that is an lie and a myth based on a complete distortion of some language that was in a bill that he made back when he was governor. And I had seen this lie repeated over in the media. So a lot of that piece was about coming to terms with the fact that that was a lie. And though there are some pretty strong critiques that can be made, what, my party in general, when it comes to LGBT rights, it's just absolute fiction that the vice president supports conversion therapy for gays and lesbians. It's fiction. And I have to argue a lot with a lot of lesbians on the left that say, well, how could you be a conservative and support this administration, or how could you support the vice president? And I have to say that some of the critiques are valid, but this conversion therapy is based on an absolute lie. And I had to say so.
And so how did the myth that you described come into being in the first place?
Okay, so this is what happened. So language from the Ryan White CARE Act, this was back when he was then Governor Pence. And he basically said that he wouldn't reauthorize funds for this CARE Act unless there were funds that were dedicated to changing the quote unquote sexual behaviors of people who are likely to be infected with HIV. Now, people took that language and said that it means conversion therapy, which is a distortion of the language. Now, changed sexual behaviors when it comes to HIV/AIDS can mean anything from safer sex use, safer sex practices, more condom use, like all of these different things. But LGBT activists on the left took that lie, distorted it, and what they do is keep the lie over and over and over again. So they will take that sentence and they will say this is quote unquote widely interpreted to mean conversion therapy, and then they will define conversion therapy pieces so that people that are not particularly media literate will take it to mean that the vice president at one time supported conversion therapy. And I've seen that done over and over again, and still to this day, there are people that believe that myth. And so when you have Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who's running for the Democratic nomination for president, with him kind of picking this fight with the vice president, and you have him, quote unquote, advocating for gay rights in that way, it's based on a lie. And what I think that it does as a gay Christian is that it moves us further apart instead of bringing us together.
And so talk a little bit about the fact that this back and forth between the vice president and the mayor, how do you think that affects, or at least that this is an issue in 2020 to begin with, or the 2020 campaign to begin with? What do you think about that being an issue?
Well, what I think that the left is doing is that they're making this an issue where nothing really exists. What the left really wants to do to gays and lesbians, I want to make them another victim group. They want to make them another victim group because gays and lesbians right now, the LGBT community votes 82% for Democrats. That's a big number. And they want to make sure that they keep that 82%. So if they can convince the vast majority of the LGBT community in America that they are going to some kind of danger or some kind of continued danger under a Republican presidency, that boom, they have that vote. And that's what I think the goal is with this conversation right now.
Our guest with us, and if you want to ask him questions about his piece and the themes that he's talking about, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats and Independents, 202-748-8002. You can reach us at C-SPAN WJ if you want to reach us on our Twitter feed. When it comes to the Trump administration itself, Mr. Smith, how do you think gays and LGBTQ have been treated, and what has to go forward, especially in this campaign? What should the administration be saying?
And I think as of right now, you have an administration that has pretty much spearheading a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality. What a lot of gays on the left say right now, they say that America is so bad for LGBT people, America is so bad for gays. There are places in the world where gays and lesbians are killed in the street, where they're thrown off rooftops, they're hung in the streets, where it is criminal to be gay, where people are thrown in prison for being gay. And I think I'm proud to support an administration that is heading this initiative to decriminalize homosexuality worldwide. And first of all, we have to get back to talking about the fact that LGBT Americans are not single issue voters. We are of various races, genders, we are not a monolithic group. And for me personally, my red pill moment, and this is what we call the red pill moment when I became a conservative, is when I saw the left's reaction to the Tulsa Orlando terror attack, when a terrorist walked into a gay bar in Orlando, Florida, and killed 49 gays and lesbians. That was a devastating attack on our group. And the only people that were forceful enough to call this out for what it was were people on the right. So I think that LGBTQians want to be safe. We want to know that the Western way of life that we live, that accepts gays and lesbians more or less right now, has integrated us in of this society. You want to make sure that you have an administration that will protect us, that will call out this stuff for exactly what it is. And what I think now is going on the left is I think that they are afraid to call these things out. And as a gay American, I don't necessarily feel safe when in charge.
Again, Rob Smith, who is with the group Turning Point USA. He's a Republican strategist. And for those who may not be familiar with Turning Point, what is that?
Turning Point is an organization that is basically building the next generation of conservative leaders on college campuses all across the country. Our slogan is "Big Government Sucks," and what we're trying to do is we want to make it safe for college students on college campuses to be open about being conservative. That it is okay for them to be conservative. Day and age, people call me a white supremacist, people call me transphobic, people call me racist, self-hating, all of these different things, specifically because I subscribe to conservative beliefs. And what we're trying to do is to create a space on college campuses where these kids can be open and honest about their beliefs. The college campuses right now are the battleground for the culture wars. That's where people, learn their politics. That's where they learn, how to grow up. That is where they learn so many things. We want to make sure that conservative principles are represented on college campuses.
Mr. Smith, does it surprise you there's a story out today that there's a Christian university in Indiana, Taylor University, that's invited the president to come speak, and that's drawing a lot of protest from that university because of that invitation?
It doesn't surprise me at all because, like I said, people have bought into the myth so much. And what I think that really boils down to, and this is a conversation that I have a lot, we do speaking engagements. I do speaking engagements, we're on campuses all across the country. But I will speak, as a matter of fact, when I was in Chicago and at the event that the vice president spoke at, I talked to some of the kids, and there are some kids that trying to reconcile their support of gays and lesbians in support of LGBT rights with their more traditional Christian beliefs. And they say, well, how can I be an you and still hold on to my beliefs? And what I say to them is, what we need to start doing is talking more about what joins us together as Christians instead of what separates us. And I think that right now, a lot of those students want to protest because he doesn't adhere to what they believe are the beliefs that they want to adhere to. And that's okay. This is America. But I think that we need more conversation, not less. You need to hear more points of view, not fewer. And that we have with the left right now is not that this is America. Everybody can believe what they want to believe. That's what makes this country amazing. But what we have is a lot of people who would rather shut down ideas and opposing viewpoints rather than hear them out and discuss them. That's what I think the major problem is going on today.
Our first call for you, sir, comes from Lilly, Kentucky. This will come from Gaithersburg, Maryland, Democrats line. Robin, you're on with our guest, Rob Smith. Go ahead.
Hello?
You're on. Go ahead.
Hello?
You're on with our guest. Go ahead.
Hello?
We're going to put you on hold. We'll go to Gary. Gary in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. Go ahead. Gary in Gary, go ahead.
you were your guest was talking about the left terrorizing or creating fear among the LGBT. You can extrapolate that to pretty much everybody else. Listening to the commercials, the campaign commercials here, basically vote for us, the Republicans will take your health care. Vote for us, the Republicans will take your Social Security and like that. And it's basically fear-mongering is what it is. It's gotten to the point where hate speech and white nationalism and things like that are the new epithets, really.
Okay.
Political epithets.
We'll let our guest respond, Mr. Smith.
I mean, I absolutely agree. You know, you made the point, Gary, that, you know, these terms like white supremacist, white nationalist, racist, it's like they're used so much that they almost start to mean nothing anymore. When you have somebody like me or Candace Owens or Charlie Kirk or any of these people who are really just conservative thinkers, when you have people throw out that kind of language, number one, the language is offensive and incendiary, but the language is meant to have conversation. The language is meant to shut down opposing viewpoints. And I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot of fear mongering that goes on. As a matter of fact, too much fear mongering that goes on both sides. And I think that I always advocate for more conversation, not less, more ideas, not fewer, more discussion. I think that is the only way to move forward from this really specific point in history that we're at right now.
In Texas, Republican line, Tony, go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I have to congratulate C-SPAN on bringing on the gentleman like this. Someone there obviously got some courage. They need to be congratulated. I'm a black man. I'm 63 years old. I had presidential vote since Jimmy Carter. I voted for Jesse Jackson when he ran. I even voted for Hillary, although too, because I believed exactly what the media told us about Trump. I knew nothing about him as well, so I voted for Hillary. I'm glad she lost. This young man reminds me, if Martin Luther King could see him, he would say, "We have arrived where you should be judged by the content of your character." But you get a lot of hate speech. This gentleman knows what I'm talking about. Because he's black, he doesn't fear the police officers from killing him. The lesbian and gay community want to be victims. He's right. I've been black all. I know a lot of people, everybody wants to be a victim, but they don't want to be black. Try being black in America when you had to, when all the things that we go through each and every day up until today, but we don't all consider ourselves victims. We don't even get victimhood status when we deserve it. So I think that I don't blame Vice President Pence. I don't blame him for his caution. These people are crazy out here. He's left the left is crazy. Don't meet with women. I'm a businessman. I don't meet with women anymore one-on-one. I just do that. I'm associated with women office hours. I go home. I don't do any of those things, and because you can be accused of anything. And of course, you are a target. He's a target simply because he doesn't agree with their accusations that everyone is a victim of the Republicans.
Okay, Tony, we'll let our guest respond. Mr. Smith.
Number one, that's a really good compliment. I appreciate it. I'm very thrown by that. But, he makes a very good point. There's a reason that I don't particularly find myself a very controversial figure. I think any of these things that I'm saying are controversial. As a matter of fact, I work very hard to not use incendiary language. But the reason why people like me, whether they're black conservatives or lesbian conservatives, are so controversial is that both of these groups are, like our caller said, have had this victimhood status drummed into their head. It's been going on as long as I've been alive, and I'm sure the gentleman that called in can go back even further than that. But I think that what we're seeing, and what I'm really excited to be a part of, is an entire new generation of millennials, Gen Zers, black, white, gay, lesbian, Latino, whatever, saying that we can live without having these things completely define every aspect of our being. We can live without having these things define aspects of our politics. And I really do think that African Americans in general in this country, one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing as far as being Flex movement and being open about being a Black conservative is that, number one, you can't have any political power in the country when 90% of your vote goes to one party. And I think that African Americans that have been voting that for all of their lives, and we see what the policies have done for us over the past 50 years, which is actually not much. And also, I do believe that it's really important to pass policies that support business owners, that support job creators, that support people that are actually bringing the jobs within the communities. And I think that that is why so many African Americans are moving to the Republican Party, specifically African American males. Now, I'm out there on the road a lot, and you see the people, and I talk to the people, and I talk to a lot of young Black men that are coming over to conservatism because they are business owners, and I think that's really important. But I'd like to thank the caller for his compliment. Really appreciate that.
From Washington State Democrats line, you're next with our guest, Rob Smith. Hello.
Good morning, and thanks for C-SPAN, as always. Mr. Smith, I'm a Democrat, about 25 years old. I'm also a veteran, a disabled veteran, who spent 30 years in the military, and I lived among people of all sorts throughout that time. I came to accept an awful lot of people that in my farming days of a farm boy would never have accepted. I have open friends, and I can tell you that over the span of my lifetime, there have been tremendous improvements in most of our citizens. And I'm a Democrat way back when that was against a hero of mine like David Eisenhower. So it's a long, long time ago. I'm a Democrat, and I made differently from the way that I think. Mr. Trump in the White House does the same thing. I'm demonized every day by people who have a single clue, who have never walked in a Democrat's shoes, who has never striven to make this a more equitable war for everybody. Back in 1960, I was a scoutmaster aboard a Naval Air Station in Southwest Texas. Black folks, white folks, gringos did not mix. You didn't even talk with each other. You avoid each other and shoot each other in every way. In 1960, I did a scoutmaster for 3 years of that Boy Scout trip. I had 2 more years to go. The phone rang in my office. There was a woman, obviously because of the tone of her voice, she was Black. And she asked if her son could be a member of the troop. I told her, of course. Bring him over to our meeting the next night. Come that night, the boys started their meeting. I had talked with them, of course, before that. We took the little office off the side to do paperwork so they could get merit badges and the like. And comes a knock at my door. And it was a woman standing there, a very, very large woman. And I rose to my desk and tried to supply. Hand open, shook her hand, welcomed her. I asked her where her son was. She said to me, "You know he's Black." I said, "Ma'am, did I ask that question?" She says, "Well, we're out with the boys." I said, "Well, bring him in and let's find out." I took her out to the meeting room, raised my hand in the scout sign, and asked the boys if any of them knew this new young lad. And asked if they would like to have a member of the troop. And my hands went up. And in Southwest Texas in 1960, I was getting questions from Blacks and whites and gringos.
Okay. Okay. Well, appreciate the story. We'll let our guests respond to it.
Yeah. Well, I think that what you're saying from the comment in the story is you think that Republicans and Democrats kind of identify each other kind of too harshly, right? So I'm saying that, liberals are bad and Democrats are bad, and then you guys are saying Republicans are bad, Republicans are this. And I think that there's a point there. I think there's absolutely a point there. And like I said, I think that we need to have more conversations across the aisle. I'm harshly critical, not necessarily of Democrats and liberals, but what I like to call leftists. So the leftists of the world go to the events that I have on college campuses or other people have on college campuses, and have no desire to do anything but shut the event down. Scream, shout, posters, bullhorns, all of that stuff. Those people I'm very harshly critical of because I think that they are getting in the way of Democrats and Republicans or conservatives and liberals actually having a conversation about how we can get together and build this country. So I understand what you're saying, and I definitely agree that sometimes we all identify each other a little bit too harshly, and that's something we can all work on.
Mr. Smith, regarding the administration, a recent one dealt with the military. This was a ban that would go into incoming transgender troops into the military. What did you think of that move?
What I think about that is really complicated, and I am going to be doing a lot more work. I think that I'm going to be doing a lot more work in terms of writing about it, in terms of really unpacking it. I haven't tweeted much about it. I haven't said much about it because I really do think that transgender is not a one-size-fits-all identity. I'm not entirely sure if there's a one-size-fits-all rule. And I think that it's a very complicated discussion that needs to have that, and I don't have, the 30, 45 to an hour to really unpack that. But what I hope to do is to use the knowledge that I have about the transgender community and some of the connections that I have to really not have to ban a little bit more via my work, but to also educate some people on the conservative side as to what exactly transgender identity is and how can we understand it more.
And so let me ask you this, you're an Iraq War veteran. Do you support the ban at all?
It's complicated. I'm not on record as saying I support it or like I said, it's very complicated. It's very complicated language. First of all, when you want to talk about serving in the military in general, because I did serve in the military and I did protest against Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I got arrested protesting Don't Ask, Don't Tell under the Obama administration to fight for the right for LGBT soldiers to serve. Now, when you talk about the trans ban, there's medical stuff going on. There's a lot of psychological stuff going on. And the fact of the matter is that 71%, and that number may be a little high, but a very high percentage of adults, no matter what, between 17 and 24 are medically disqualified for military service. So the difference between the transgender ban and the ban from lesbians, gays, and bisexuals openly in the military is that there's a medical and a psychological element to the transgender conversation that really, really complicates things. And I think that there are people who don't necessarily understand it. I think it needs to be unpacked a little bit more. And also, I think the public needs to be educated a lot more in a more, straightforward way about the intricacies of transgender identity. Because you have a lot of people that are trans activists on the left that are saying one thing, and they're saying things that are not based reality, and they're trying to abolish biological sex and all these different things. And then you have people on the right that don't really know a whole lot about transgender identity. All they know is that, these boys that identify as girls are now beating girls on the sports field. So I think that it's a really, really complicated conversation that we would all need to really look deeper into and talk about a little bit more.
From Owen in Grand Junction, Colorado, on a Republican line, you're on with our guest, Rob Smith. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mr. Smith if the citizens are getting in the way of them. I was just going to say that I thought that the fact was they were illegitimate because Obama said he couldn't change, gay marriage, but then the Supreme Court decided that they were going to go ahead and make it so that we know Congress makes the law, right? And if I say anything about it, all men are created equal, but not hate speech, What's controversial is the fact that the Pledge of Allegiance says it's under God, and that ain't the way it should be. I'll pray for your souls.
I don't even know what to say to that, but okay, thanks for calling in.
Chicago, Illinois.
Hold on, go ahead. Let me respond to that.
Please do.
Because as somebody that's a gay conservative, I get a lot of messages like that on social media. I get a lot of messages from people that are conservative that are like, love the sinner, hate the sin, everything like that. And this is what I always say. I'm a gay Christian. I have a relationship with God. God and I love God. We're good. So there's not a human being on this planet that is going to tell me that God has more or less love for me based on their vision of Christianity.
Do you get asked about evangelical Christians who largely support the president and the position they may take to somebody like you and they may not agree with you?
Yeah, I mean, I really do get asked asked about that a lot. And like I always say, look, this is America, okay? Everybody is able to believe what they want to believe. And it's a very specific area that I'm in right now, being somebody that is a gay Republican Christian. And a lot of people have questions about this. And what I say to them is that as long as what you believe is not hurting me in any way, you can believe whatever you want to believe. But I think that sometimes people's deep Christian beliefs can sometimes wade into the waters of discrimination when it comes to public policy. And as a conservative, I don't agree with any federal dollars being used to discriminate against anybody, because my gay tax dollars are going to this. You know what I mean? So like I said, that's a very complicated conversation that I am thrilled to have evangelical Christians.
You mentioned Mayor Pete Buttigieg. As far as him being openly gay and a presidential candidate, what does that suggest to you about the future of this issue, particularly in politics?
It suggests to me, honestly, the fact that Buttigieg is a credible nominee, or excuse me, a credible candidate for the presidency on the Democratic side, speak to me, and it tells me that we have really pushed the needle forward when it comes to acceptance of gays and lesbians in America in all capacities. I'm a gay Republican, he's a gay Democrat. We've really pushed the needle forward, and what I'm trying to do with the space that I occupy right now is to push people beyond gay as an identity, or gay that means a whole lot when it comes to people's political beliefs. We should be able to, I as a gay man should be able to believe what I want to believe. Pete Buttigieg as a gay man should be able to believe whatever he wants to believe. That's what makes America great, because this is America. You know, that's what makes America. And what I'm trying to do right now is to open the eyes of lots of gays and lesbians in America and say, hey, maybe Democrat policies don't work for you. Maybe with your sexual orientation, it's not going to be the thing that is the most important for you when it comes to your bottom line and the changes that you want to see in your daily life.
Here is Larry from Chicago, independent line for our guest. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Pedro. Thank you for taking my call. I want to upgrade the conversation. What do you think of this idea? A working class president that thinks like Ronald Reagan and plays guitar like Elvis. Yes. Okay. You had a segment just before you came on the air with the student camp winners. At the end of the segment, it was the American flag next to McDonald's franchise. That's not healthy. So I'm from California originally. Frank Capra was a friend of mine, and I got him to come to the Defense Information School in Indiana in 1980 to discuss the Why We Fight series. Why We Fight is to preserve freedom and hopefully bring us together as a people. So, and knows me. Hope you have a healthy day. And
okay, we got you, Larry. Let's go to Rudy in California, Democrats line. Rudy, good morning.
Good morning, Pedro, Mr. Smith. I agree with you as an old black liberal that colleges should allow people to speak. I have called colleges to allow that here in California. Now, my only problem is about the conservatives is they don't have enough African American reputation in their ranks. I realize there's only a certain amount of chairs at the table, but if the Republican Party looked along the country in whole, I think they would have a better shot. You only have 2 black Republicans in all of the Congress on the conservative side. So I would like to know what's that problem with conservatives, bringing in African American politicians. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, and that's an amazing question, and I want to take that on. I definitely agree. Conservatives and the Republican Party have a branding problem. We really do. I think that a part of what I was just kind of be one of the people that can change that. When you look at how many blacks are represented in the Republican ranks compared to how many blacks are represented in the Democrat ranks, you have to realize that Republicans are. I feel like the conservative movement is just now getting to a point when it comes to people, you know, in the media, people represented on social media, whatever. We're just now getting to the point where there are real, credible black voices that are out there saying that, you know, you can be active and support the Republican Party as well. I think that where the Democrats have us is that they have had these kinds of voices. Not only have they been politicians, but they've also been celebrities, rappers, entertainers, ball players, famous journalists. You have so many people that are represented on the Democrat whose entire existence is about pushing the idea that blacks can only be Democrats, pushing liberal policies and liberal ideas to African American communities. Now, I understand that the conservatives definitely have a branding problem in that way. And what I think that is really special about this moment right now, and if anybody's heard of Candace Owens' movement, the Black Nation from the Democratic Party, there's a really interesting moment happening right now with Black conservatives, and they're getting their start on social media. My start on social media. I made my transition to conservatism, and I just started speaking out and becoming more visible about it. That is what I truly think is going to move people for African Americans to come over to the conservative side. And I think it is very important that we have a Republican Party that looks like America and reflects America. That's where the Democrats have us, because they can trot out every color, religion, orientation of people under the sun, and they can say, we represent. The conservatives have a really hard time doing that. I think it's getting better. I think it's changing. And the organization that I'm here as a part of Turning Point USA is really is amazing at finding these young conservatives of every color, and getting them on the college campuses and really training them to be the new generation of conservative leaders. I really do think that we're moving the needle right now. And when you look at what's going on in 10, 15, 20 years compared to now, I think you're going to see a whole lot more representation of African Americans on the Republican side.
Do you get that sense of outreach with the Trump administration, particularly with its 2020 campaign?
I do. I absolutely do. From seeing what I'm seeing on the ground, from seeing what I'm seeing as a part of the organization that I'm working with, there is a major play for African American voters that is going to happen leading into the 2020 election. What a lot of people don't realize is that Democrats cannot win national elections without African American voters, specifically without 90% black vote. You move that needle to even 13, 14% of blacks voting Republican, they cannot win a national election without us. Why we're suddenly having the reparations talk, and we're suddenly having this talk on the Democratic side with just more handouts for African Americans, real solutions.
From our Republican line, this is from Pennsylvania. Annette, hello.
Hey, hi, Rob. I think this is awesome. The Turning Point movement, I just think that's wonderful. What I want to say is, as a Republican myself, I think it's terrible that the Democrats and the left are putting such fear in the people, and especially the younger generation that are of voting age, that they're putting fear in everybody that is of voting age to make everybody think that, the Republicans are racist. And now Republicans can't go on campuses. You can't go outside. Anybody, if you're Republican, wear a MAGA hat in fear of being attacked. I think that's terrible. Me and my own family, my daughter and my son, are totally against what I believe in. So I've lost contact with my daughter over it. It's just terrible, but I give you credit, and I love you. I love you guys. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. And I just think it's terrible. Al Sharpton had his convention with all the Democrat people that are running. they put all this fear and hate into everybody that was there. So that Trump hates everybody. He's a racist. He's this, he's that. And that's just terrible. They're telling lies.
Okay, Annette, look, apologies, we'll have to end it there.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, first of all, your story is heartbreaking, and I really wish that didn't happen to you. And what we have right now, that there is a strategy on the left right now, and the strategy on the left is to make it so completely unacceptable to be not only a conservative, but just an administration, that it's really, people are losing friends, people are losing contact with their family members. To me, it is absolutely insane. When I came out as a conservative, a little bit, almost been a year, but when I came out as conservative, when I said, okay, I'm just going to be open about these beliefs, I did lose friends. I did lose acquaintances. I was iced out from social networks. I'm the gay guy that lives in New York City, the bluest of the blue. So I was iced out of a lot of social networks. So I definitely understand what's going on. And like I said, I always bring it back to the fact that the incendiary rhetoric, I think, kind of needs to be brought down a little bit, not in terms of what, politicians are saying on social media with journalists or whatever, but in our day-to-day lives. We cannot let this stuff tear us apart as Americans. And one way like that, it breaks my heart that somebody has a fractured relationship with a blood relative over politics.
Rob Smith, a Republican strategist with Turning Point USA, joining us for this discussion. Mr. Smith, we thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
For the remaining of our program, about 20 minutes or so, we'll get your thoughts on the current status of Campaign 2020. You could talk about the president's reelection campaign. You could talk about Democrats running against or potential Democrats. And here's how you can reach us. 202-748-8001 for Republicans. Democrats, 202-748-8000. And Independents, 202-748-8002. We'll take those calls when we come back.
Once, TV was simply three giant networks of government-supported service called PBS. Then, in 1979, a small network with an unusual name rolled out a big idea. Let viewers decide, all on their own, what was important to them. C-SPAN opened the doors to Washington policy making for all to see, bringing you unfiltered content from Congress and beyond. In the age of power to the people, this was true people power. In the 40 years since, the landscape has clearly changed. There's no monolithic media, broadcasting has given way to narrowcasting, YouTube stars are thin. But C-SPAN's big idea is more relevant today than ever. No government money supports C-SPAN. Its nonpartisan coverage of Washington is funded as a public service cable or satellite provider. On television and online, C-SPAN is your unfiltered view of government, so you can make up your own mind.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
And what your country can do for you and what you can do for your country.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear of us soon.
C-SPAN's newest book, The Presidents, Noted Historians Rank America's Best and Worst Chief Executive, provides insight into the lives of the 44 American presidents through stories gathered by interviews with noted presidential historians. Explore the life events that shaped our challenges they faced, and the legacies they have left behind. Published by Public Affairs, C-SPAN's The Presidents will be on shelves April 23rd. But you pre-order your copy as a hardcover or ebook today at cspan.org/thepresidents or wherever books are sold. Washington Journal continues.
You can make your comments about Campaign 2020 by calling us on the phone lines. Republicans 202-748-8001, Democrats 202-748-8000, and Independents 202-748-8002. This was just posted on the website Business Insider. The headline: there's a growing amount of evidence that the president has a great shot of being reelected in 2020 The author writes that the president's approval rating is currently around 45% according to Gallup. Trump's most recent predecessor, President Barack Obama, had an identical approval rating at this point in his presidency and was reelected in 2012. In mid-April back in 2011, shortly after he announced his reelection bid, the president's approval rating was hovering between 43 and 45%, right on the president's current level. Comparatively, mid-April of 1995, former President Clinton had an approval rating of 46%. This story also adds that the president is also dominating possible Democratic opponents in the fundraising race. The president raised $30 million in the first quarter of 2019 and has about $40 million in cash on hand. That's from Business Insider taking a look at the president's reelection campaign. USA Today this morning takes a look at those on the tech side, highlighting Bernie Sanders about polling that's been done. This is William Cummins saying that when asked who they would support from a list of 20 candidates, including someone else, 29% named Bernie Sanders and 24% named Joe Biden in an Emerson College poll released on Monday. They were trailed by the South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who was the pick of 9% of likely Democratic primary voters. California Senator Kamala Harris and former Texas Representative Beto O'Rourke each came in at 8%. It picked Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, and then it goes on from there. William Cummings wrote the story. You can see that in the pages of USA Today this morning. Again, those 2020 things we'll talk about till the 15 minutes or so that we have left. 202-748-8000, one for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and Independent, 202-748-8002. Christos in Ohio, Democrats line. Hello, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to respond to the question what my top issue was in the presidential race, and I'm a little bit about it. I just turned 18 2 weeks ago, registered to vote. I am looking forward to voting for the first time, but for me, I'm just not found a candidate to fully back yet, but I'm going to be backing whoever can really just help unify the party as well as the country then in the general election, because no matter what any policy decisions President Trump makes, they're going to be overturned most likely by any Democrat who's elected. So I worry more about the damage to the institution of the presidency, our democracy as a whole. And that's why I'm most likely going to be backing a candidate, not solely on policy, but more on ideals and if they can help bridge the divide in the nation.
Altria in Indiana, Independent line. Hello.
Yes, my name is. Well, I just would like to say that the 2020 race has become all about do you support gay rights, and until God says we support gay, I think America should slow down.
Okay, let's hear from Jerry in Washington State. Hi.
Hi, this is Jerry.
You're on. Go ahead.
I was actually calling about the Robert Smith guy. He's a nice young guy, but he's a young kid. And I noticed that with the Candace Owens and the Republican movement, they're going for the younger African American males, and that's because of the crisis that goes on with African American males. And they also understand that usually politics. He said he got in the Brexit movement or the Republican movement about a year ago. So you tell somebody in a year I'm going to put you on TV, they will do anything. They compromise their souls and everything. And I feel sorry for the kids because the backlash of this is terrible. They don't understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, but they're getting that thing. And Candace Owens is full of fiction. She's been discredited on everything. She sued everybody. She's ridiculous.
Jerry, that's Jerry in Washington State. By the way, Candace Owens appearing in front of a committee in which she had an extended back and forth with legislator Ted Lieu. If you want to see that, it was one of our most recent watch when it came to numbers of people watching it online. It hit really impressive numbers, at least the way we track them. But if you want to see it for yourself, type in her name, Ted Lieu's name in the box there. You can see that, all that available to you at cspan.org. The mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, in Des Moines, Iowa. This story from William Cummings, also of USA Today. That protesters shouting about, quote, Sodom and Gomorrah interrupted the South Bend, Indiana mayor on Tuesday at a rally. He hopes to become the first openly gay president in American history. One of them shouted about the biblical cities destroyed by God's wrath for their sinful ways was Randall Terry, a Christian activist who founded the anti-abortion rights group Operation Rescue. The organization says it split with him years ago and now considers him too radical. The response, though, by the mayor saying that the good news is the condition of my soul's in the hands of God, but the Iowa caucuses are up you. The mayor still continues on in Iowa. He'll be in Des Moines today. And if you want to see some of the comments he'll make later on, about 12:30 this afternoon, you can go to our website at c.org, monitor it at C-SPAN. At C-SPAN, you can watch it. You can see it at cspan.org and our radio app. A couple of other events, too, when it comes to 2020 campaigns. The top Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, also in Des Moines. See her comments at 7:30 this evening on C-SPAN, the .org, and the radio app. Plus, you can also listen to Beto O'Rourke. He'll be in Alexandria, Virginia, 3:30 this afternoon. You can watch again on C-SPAN, the .org, and the radio app, all of that part of our Road to the White House 2020. Again, you can go to the website, find out everything that we will show you when it comes to campaign coverage. That is cspan.org. Keith at Nashville, Tennessee, Democrats line. Hi.
Hey, John, good morning. The gentleman earlier, he was talking about how the rhetoric and the bashing and name calling. Today, hello?
You're on, go ahead.
Yes, the gentleman that you had on earlier today, he was talking about the name calling and the bashing, that type of stuff. I just think that we need to, if we get rid of Trump, then a lot of this stuff will stop. And that's just my comment today. Thank you.
Republican line, Bill is Jefferson Township. Hello.
Yeah, my main issue is I vote pro-life. Until the Democrats get on board and start respecting life, I can't vote for them. That's my main issue. And I like to see the candidates have real issues and stop, especially on the Democratic side, their issue is getting rid of Trump. And he's not as bad as they want to make him into a devil, a demon. And he's doing a lot for America. He says, stop drinking the Kool-Aid and wake up, the Democrats.
That's Bill in Jefferson Township. The publication New York on its website, the cut section of the website, talks about the team that Senator Elizabeth Warren has put together as part of her 2020 campaign, saying that by the end of the first quarter, Warren's campaign had 161 staff members, with about half of them currently positioned in various states. Reuters pointed out that the Sanders campaign had 86 people on payroll at the time, and Harris had 44. President Donald Trump's reelection campaign, meanwhile, reportedly around 400,000 during the first quarter and receives help from the Republican National Committee, which has hundreds of staffers. Again, you can read more of that at the New York website. Jerry, Detroit, Michigan, Democrats line. Hello.
Hello, Pedro, and greetings again from Motown. As a 53-year-old black man, before, I wish you had kept your last guest on a little while longer, and I wanted to respond to one particular white caller. I wanted to ask him, but I couldn't, if he thinks white people in America really haven't changed as far as their views of black people in America, because I don't really think, especially with the older generation, and as I always say by older, let's just say baby boomer age white people, that they really have changed as far as their views and their hatred of black people. And it's those last two white callers regarding talking about demonization of Trump. Weren't these the same racist white people throughout this, who trashed Obama and gave them a lot of hell throughout this entire presidency, but they have the unmitigated gall to complain about Trump being vilified? I mean, I think this doesn't smack of white hypocrisy on the part of racist white conservatives. Then what else can it be?
That's Jerry. That's Jerry in Michigan. We'll hear from Susan, and Susan is in Tampa, Florida, Independent Line. Hi.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call. Just a quick comment in general. Candidly, if I had my way, I wish we could drop all the labels. I respect conservatism. I respect Republicans. I respect press. I respect moderates. I respect progressives. However, I think, and this probably won't happen in my lifetime, if we could just be people and drop all of these labels. I taught public school for 35 years, and I didn't know all the kids. And I really feel if we drop the labels, maybe we could just come across as just being individuals. I think it would be helpful. Thank you for your time.
The Washington Morning takes a look at money raised by candidates on the Democratic side. It highlights Kirsten Gillibrand. Again, you can see her later today. Raises less than $3 million for her race. This is according to S.A. Miller. He highlights that Senator Sanders of Vermont led with $18 million, followed by Kamala Harris of California with $12 million, former Representative Beto O'Rourke, $9.4 million, the South Bend mayor of $7 million, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts $6 million, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota $5.2 million, and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey of $5 million. This adds that the Gillibrand campaign is kept afloat with $9.6 million left over from her last Senate campaign, which gives her the third most cash on hand after Mr. Sanders' $15 million and Ms. Warren's $11 million. Again, you can see more of that story at the Washington Times. In Tennessee, Floyd is next, Republican line.
Hello?
You're on, go ahead.
I'm ready to talk if he's ready to talk.
You're on right now, go right ahead.
Oh, I am. If they get rid of Trump, North Vietnam is going to liberate South Vietnam. The Russians are going to liberate, the Ukraine, and everybody's going to start paying taxes to South China Sea. There isn't anybody else that's going to be strong enough that they will keep dealing with us. Thank you very much.
Mississippi next. This is Richard, Democrats line. Mississippi, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to say that we have to vote blue and get the Democrats back in office, and that whatever Democrat wins the primary is fine with me. And all I have to say for people that want to vote Republican or follow along with Trump, that birtherism is racism, and Donald Trump is a racist, and simple as that.
It's Richard in Mississippi. In the business section of the New York Times, a story taking a look at a forum held by David Axelrod. This was with 2020 campaign reporters in previous presidential campaigns. The 2020 campaign and what they should be aware of going into it. Some of the highlights from the story saying most political journalists spend a lot of time on Twitter tracking the real-time thoughts of pundits, active campaign operatives, and reporters like themselves. Most speakers here said that was not a great idea. Well, you have to be skeptical of what you're seeing and reading on Twitter and applying it to the electorate. That's Sam Feist, CNN bureau chief. If you think you understand what's motivating voters because you're reading it on Twitter, you may be completely wrong. When it comes to the section on polling, it was the CNN reporter Jeff Zeleny who cautioned conference goers to steer clear of prognostication. Well, we're not in the predictions business, so don't act like we are and say we don't know the outcome, nor should we embrace that. Or as Amy Walter, National Political Report, put it, reporters are talking about polls like a lot of preteens talking about sex. They know all the words, they talk about it a lot, they have no idea what they're talking about. Or that in the Times. From Paul in Michigan, Republican line. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? I just wanted to call in for Michigan. President Trump will win Michigan again. UAW Republican was elected to the UAW. 50-60% of the UAW workers are going to vote for President Trump. The Republican Party is for the American worker. And I think we're going to get moderate Democrats and conservative Democrats crossing over, and a lot of the independent vote. So I just want to throw it out there. And his trade deals, he's renegotiating, protecting the border, legal immigration, like we all have. You know, in our country, we're the melting pot. We assimilate. Each of us do out of many ones. So we're very patriotic here. So I think we're going to do very well in Michigan for President Trump.
Beside your own assessment, though, what do you point that to? What evidence? What do you look to as evidence for that?
From the last election, because I was out there handing out signs for President Trump, and I talked to people who were union and non-union. We talked about it. That's race vote, and that's, I'm just telling you. And I volunteered for the campaign out here in Michigan. And for people, it's just a cross-section of people. Basically, the trade deals. I worked in the factory. And in the 90s, when NAFTA was starting, That was to combat the euro. You remember back then? But what happened is the jobs, sucking some of the jobs Ross Perot talked about. And everybody saw that. And you can see it in the manufacturing sector. The gross domestic product was like 33% of the gross domestic product in the 80s. Now it's down to what, 12 to 14% average of the country.
Okay.
Michigan's, okay.
Yep. So this is from the Washington Examiner saying that the Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke and his wife have underpaid their taxes for 2 years, according to a report. The couple appeared to underpay 2013 and 2014 taxes more than $4,000 because they made a mistake in the way they reported their medical expense. That is according to an accountant who looked over the returns for the Wall Street Journal. O'Rourke and his wife, who released their tax returns on Monday, took medical expense deductions that were permitted for medical and dental expenses about % of income. Quote, after becoming aware of this error, the accounting firm that prepared the filing was immediately informed and will file an amendment as appropriate. Let's hear from John. John in Trenton, New Jersey, working line.
Thanks for having me on your program, Pedro. I'm an ex-Republican now. Donald Trump has got a plate up his hand. He's got all the Democrats coming out, and they're going to be taking up his airtime on TV. And things don't look good because he hasn't released his taxes. If he released taxes and he got something going positively with his campaign that the Democrats didn't have power over him, and they wouldn't have all these committees that constantly taking up his airtime, he may have reelected.
Okay, that's John in Trenton, New Jersey. Will be the last call for this segment, and that's it for the program today. Another edition comes your way at 7 o'clock tomorrow. We're going to get to an event here in Washington, D.C. It's sponsored by the Bipartisan Policy Center. It will feature the comments of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau Director Kathy Kraninger, and as she comments about what she would like to see as far as her tenure at the agency and what she would like to bring to it. Those comments set to start momentarily.
The Biden Policy Center on a pleasant spring Wednesday. Really delighted today to be joined by Kathy Kraninger, who, as you all know, is the director of the Consumer Financial Bureau. CFPB has been a central player, I think would be an understatement, in the financial regulation post-crisis. And I think also fair to say its creation and its actions have been an occasional source of some controversy and public interest. And so we are really pleased that we'll have an opportunity to really understand from Kathy what her vision is going forward, just to situate the conversation. On the CFPB website, I think they really neatly describe the organization's mission as to protect consumers from unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices, and to take action against companies that break the law, as well as arm people with the information, steps, and tools they need to make smart financial decisions. So it's the 3 E's: empower, enforce, and educate. Last year, President Trump appointed and the Senate confirmed Kathy to serve as the director of CFPB. She's the 5th person, I believe, to actually sit in the office, only the 2nd to actually be formally confirmed by the Congress, which I think provides a real opportunity and anchor to the organization. Director Kraninger is a native of Chagrin Falls, Ohio, which I have had the pleasure of visiting. She has had a broad career in public service, beginning with where she spent 2 years in the Ukraine, then worked on a number of different congressional committees. She's been in the leadership team at DOT, at DHS, and mostly at the Office of Management and Budget. And as this is the Bipartisan Policy Center, I can't help but note that the director's career in public service was sparked by an internship on the Hill with then Congressman Sherrod Brown. Some of you may be aware that now Senator Brown also has a casual interest in some of the issues before the CFPB, so I hope that relationship stayed strong. CFPB is of incredible importance to all Americans, and it's really, I think, a great opportunity to hear from the director. Following her remarks, Pete Schrader, who covers financial regulation for Reuters, will lead a conversation. Pete's reporting career basically began in the financial crisis. He hooked right off the bat. Prior to his time with Reuters, he spent several years at the Hill newspaper, and before that, focusing on the intricacies of the financial markets with the bond buyer. Pete, if you pay attention to the news, is one of the more prolific writers here in DC. I find that the depth of detail he brings and the accessibility of his stories are pretty unique. I think just this week, Pete's written on U.S.-China trade, on some of these swirling dynamics around Fed appointments, and also on the recent conclusions of the IMF, global financial security. So after Pete and Kathy begin a conversation, we are then going to have an opportunity for some audience engagement. We are anticipating a lot of interest, and so we're asking people to write down questions on some note cards, pass them to the aisle. We have some fleet-footed staff who will be collecting those so that Pete has a chance to make sure we're honing in on the issues of interest. And so with that, really a pleasure, Director, to ask you to come share your thoughts.
Thank you to our hosts for the invitation and to all of you for coming today. I'm particularly honored to be at a forum focused on bringing people together from across the political spectrum to forge common sense solutions to the pressing issues that are facing our nation today. That's the approach that I am taking against consumer protection and the mission of the Bureau. I want to specifically thank Jason Grumet, the president of the Bipartisan Policy Center, as well as BPC staff, Shia and John Sarushian. BPC has supported dialogue on myriad issues, including the mission of the CFPB. As demonstrated by my interest, I'm no stranger to public service. I started in the Peace Corps and served in the legislative branch at several cabinet agencies, and where I also supported several startups. While my positions have largely been political appointments, I learned early on in my career that the responsibility and duty of public service is to carry it as a public trust. I worked under Secretary Mineta, former Democratic Congressman and Clinton Commerce Secretary, served as President Bush's Secretary of Transportation. He liked to say that there are no Democratic roads or Republican highways. While being mindful of the political environment and considerations, we focused on developing and promoting the right policies for the American people. We also engaged in robust, transparent discourse on what those right policies were, both internally and externally, with the many stakeholders who cared about their policies. I had that model in my career, and I'm bringing that to my leadership at the CFPB. On my first day on the job last December, I launched a 3-month listening tour. I met with well over 400 consumer groups, state and local government officials, faith leaders, military personnel, academics, nonprofits, financial institutions, and current consumer advisory committees to the Bureau, and consumers. I've also met with and heard from the talented Bureau staff across the country and at headquarters. During these discussions, I heard a broad range of views about the Bureau, its work, and its future. I can tell you there is no shortage of opinion. Here are a few areas of consensus among the viewpoints that I heard. First, the CFPB's mission and the agency itself are critical to the economy and are not going away. A level playing field amongst financial services providers is an important goal. Harm consumers and undermine the integrity of markets, and they should be held accountable. All stakeholders express strong interest in protecting consumers, therefore on the best way to accomplish that mutual interest. I want to thank everyone who shared their perspectives. These viewpoints have been indispensable in shaping my approach to executing the mission of consumer protection. Today, I will lay out that approach and what it means to the Bureau and its partners. Notably, a continued commitment to engagement with all our stakeholders is a key part of that approach. In the wake of the financial crisis, Congress had a robust debate over splitting safety and soundness from consumer protection. Ultimately, Congress' Dodd-Frank Act created the CFPB to be singularly focused on consumer protection in the market for financial products and services. Indeed, Congress articulated the purpose and objectives of the CFPB. In summary, the Act states that the Bureau shall seek to implement and, where applicable, enforce federal consumer law consistently for the purpose of ensuring that all consumers have access to markets for consumer financial products and services, and that those markets are fair, transparent, and competitive. Congress gave significant powers and tools to the director to carry out that mission. Those tools include education, regulation, supervision, and enforcement, each of which serves an important component in the Bureau's execution of its mission. As director, I believe that the best application of these tools is to focus on prevention of harm to consumers. I'll be talking about each of these tools in turn and how we will use them going forward to prevent consumer harm. After that, I will briefly address the challenge of measuring success in preventing harm, as well as our commitment to transparent, productive use. Our first tool is education. Congress specifically charged the Bureau with conducting financial education programs and ensuring consumers receive timely and understandable information to make responsible decisions about financial transactions. The Bureau cannot be everywhere with everyone at every transaction, nor should it try to be. They're empowering consumers to help themselves, protect their own interests, and choose the products and services that best fit their need is vital to preventing consumer harm and build financial well-being. With the multitude of public and private sector entities engaged in consumer financial education, I also want to ensure the Bureau uses its education where it is uniquely positioned to add value and provide leadership. Through the listening tour, I sought feedback from stakeholders about the value of our educational materials and how they're. I listened to Bureau staff and other experts describe the approaches we've taken to financial education. Specifically, the Bureau recognized a gap and conducted extensive research to develop a consumer-centric definition of financial well-being that goes well beyond income and credit score. It captures a person's sense of financial security and freedom of choice in the present and the future. Core to that security is control over day-to-day and month-to-month personal finances, as well as the capacity to avoid financial shock. We've also found that consumers can experience financial well-being, or lack of it, across a wide range of incomes. It is tied to financial skills and confidence in those skills. Today's consumers need these skills more than ever. For example, fewer than half of Americans set aside money for their children's education. More and more people reach retirement with incomes and savings that simply won't meet their needs. Perhaps most distressing to me was the Federal Reserve report around 40% of Americans would turn to credit to cover a $400 emergency. That last statistic in particular caught my attention. Talked with nonprofits engaged in financial well-being education, fintech companies developing apps around savings, media personalities, members of our advisory committees, and CEOs of financial institutions, among others, share that concern. As we collectively support Americans building financial well-being, tackling emergency savings is a logical place to start. It is a key element as people address the broader issues in their financial lives around attaining and retaining good credit, managing their debt, and maintaining a healthy habit of savings. To effective approaches to savings, and particularly emergency savings, the Bureau recently launched our Start Small Save Up initiative. It offers tools and tips and it can help consumers build a basic savings cushion and develop a savings habit. Later this year, we'll be launching a savings boot camp, a series of videos, a very readable, informative booklet that serves as a roadmap to a savings plan. I encourage you to find out more about our website on Start Small, Save. Let me be clear, however. The ultimate goal for the Bureau is not to produce booklets and great content on our website. The goal is to move the needle on the numbers in this country who can cover a financial shock like a $400 emergency. I'm committed to bringing together partners from across sectors to develop and execute a strategy to achieve outcome. The collective investment in financial education in this country is substantial, and I believe we can increase the level of emergency savings by bringing these efforts together. I'm willing to listen, to promote the best practices of others, and to share or give credit, because this is not about promoting the Bureau or any one individual. At the right coalition, putting our energy and talents towards this goal, we can significantly increase the level of emergency savings across the country, resulting in consumers taking control of financial lives. I'm challenging all of you listening today to take this on with the CFPB. Our second tool for preventing consumer harm is making and guidance where appropriate. Articulating clear rules of the road for regulated entities that promote competition, increase transparency, and prepare markets for financial products and services. When Congress directs the CFPB to promulgate rules or address specific issues through rulemaking, we will comply with the law. Where the Bureau has discretion, we will focus on preventing consumer harm by maximizing informed consumer choice and prohibiting acts or practices which undermine the ability of consumers to choose the products and services that are best for them. To develop the best possible rules, the CFPB must use the best possible process. Rules are general standards. They are not best articulated on a case-by-case basis through enforcement actions. Rather, they should be developed through a rulemaking process, transparent, that allows stakeholders to submit comments, that reflects rigorous economic and market analysis, and that provides for judicial review. Ultimately, I don't believe anyone benefits from rules that are rushed out the door after having gone through a flawed process. Under my leadership, the CFPB will proceed deliberately and transparently in its rulemakings. Let me give you a concrete example of where all stakeholders have been seeking clearer rules of the road, and if CFPB rulemaking is designed to do exactly this. In the coming weeks, the Bureau will release proposed rules to implement the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. As many of you know, the act was passed in 1977, the same year that Steve Jobs introduced the world to the idea of a personal computer with the design of the Apple II. Phone booths were on almost every corner, maybe people in this room that have never seen a phone booth, and cell phones were not even imaginable. And though there have been many advances in communications technologies since 1977, CCPA has not been updated to reflect our use of these technologies. The Bureau will propose clarifying rules to better enable the use of modern communications technology in collections activity. The proposed rules also would protect consumers with clear, bright line limits on the number of calls they may receive from debt collectors on a weekly basis. We will propose to provide clarity on how collectors may communicate via newer technologies such as email or text messages. We will propose that collectors provide consumer and better information at the outset of collection to help them identify their debts and understand their options, including their rights in disputing debts or paying them. As the CFPB moves to modernize the legal regime for debt collection, we are keenly interested in the views of stakeholders and look forward to engagement with you. The nature of rules, combined with the unpredictable pace of change in technology and market, it is imperative that the CFPB be vigilant in evaluating the rules the agency has issued. Under the Dodd-Frank Act, the CFPB must submit a report assessing the effectiveness of the rule in meeting the purposes and objectives of Title 10 and the goals stated by the Bureau. The CFPB to determine whether our rules are working in the real world. Early in my tenure, the CFPB issued assessment reports address servicing and ATR-QM rules. We have more such efforts in the pipeline and have been discussing the best way to approach these assessments.
Dumpster diving, I call it treasure hunting. I've eaten fruit out of the garbage.
You've got to be willing to look her in the eye and say, I am done.
I don't even think I want her back.
You're going to bury your and spend.
The bed. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you 8 sleep. I've got.
Yeah.
For a couple of days, I was out of town celebrating my birthday, my 21st birthday. Jeff told me that he wrecked my vehicle hitting a deer, and I had to clean the car out myself after he left it stinking of weed. He originally agreed to pay for the deductible and any damages. I never saw a penny from him directly. My grandmother gave me some money and said that he was going to pay her back, and I don't know if he did or not.
Jeff says he's had no choice but to move back into a bedroom at his mom's house when his marriage and career completely fell apart. It was 16 years ago. And I guess during that 6 years, he's never had an opportunity to turn things around. He admits that during that time, he's just completely given up.
This is my bedroom. This is where I was in high school. I've been in the stream off and on for 20 years. It's pretty much when I was in high school. I do feel like a high school kid again in a way.
Lori Loughlin and her husband, Massimo Giannulli, they are pleading not guilty in charges stemming from that college admission scandal. According to court documents filed on Monday in Boston federal court, Loughlin and her husband are waiving their right to appear in court for an arraignment. They are pleading not guilty. It's not known whether a judge will accept the request or require Loughlin to show up to enter her plea.
That's right. So a source close to the actress recently told people that Loughlin was very concerned about what a guilty plea would do to her daughters. Now, according to prosecutors, Loughlin allegedly wanted her daughters to get into the University of California so badly that she and her husband paid approximately $500,000 in bribes to falsely designate their daughters as recruits to the U.S. the fact that they did not participate in crude. The source also added that Loughlin didn't want to take a deal because she didn't see it as being a legal violation. The source continued, quote, she felt that any mom would have done if they had the means to
Thank you. One moment. Yeah, this is the amethyst 14K yellow gold ring, right?
Yeah.
In a gold color. That would be for $640.
Right. And let me see a different one. It's 050048470173.
Let me check that item for you. That is the green amethyst and 14, the green color. Is that the
Yes.
There's an important distinction here, right, Mike? Because when life's not working out and things aren't, you go down one path, which is kind of a medical model where you say this is psychiatric or this is mental illness, and it might require medication, therapy, hospitalization, or whatever. Or there's another path you can go down, which you just say is dysfunctional behavior, and you need to behave your way out of it. That's where we find you, is on this behavioral path, correct?
That's correct. First things first, let's kind of change our posture. I want to know from you, why would we take you on as a client? To help you improve your life, why would we take you on?
Because I want to change my life. I don't want to be where I'm at right now. I'm just don't know how to do it.
And you're willing to go to any length to do it?
Whatever I need to do.
I mean, seriously, you want out of this, right?
Yeah.
You don't like this.
No, I don't like it at all.
And there's no way you like this. You're not a good role model for your children. You have to feel guilty for burdening your mother the way that you are. And your life's not working. He's given us some excuses here for stuck life. According to Jeff, he divorced and got fired from his job, so he lost momentum there. He says his mother treats him like a child. That's mutually defined. It says he can't move and can't find a job. It says mom stopped him from his dream job in Seattle. He's not interested in any of the jobs in his area. It's too cold. Jobs here use old, dirty grease. According to Tori and Monica and Janet, he blames Janet for not giving him money for a third aviation degree. He won't go to therapy because they're afraid they're going to tell him it's his fault. He believes his family's out to get him, and his father was tough on him and teach him how to be a dad.
The whole description I see right here is what I say with clients. We call it the wham-bulance, that you're waiting to pick you up, right? It's not, or it's here now.
So let's talk about inertia, because that's what we're dealing with here, right? I mean, it's just a lack of movement or activity, and it's a property of matter by which it is at rest unless acted upon by some external force. Meet external force. Okay? And so we've got to overcome this. Something's got to shake you out of this, and that's what you're intending to do, right?
Well, we would start 7 a.m., you're out of the house. 6 p.m., you're home. It's going to lock the door. He's not allowed home. Your video game system's getting turned in. Your TV's getting turned in. You're saying you're willing to go to any lengths, right? So sometimes we have to make a drastic change in our lives.
It's all on me, I know.
Winners do things losers don't want to do. It's just that simple. Winners do things losers don't do. They get up in the morning, they go out and do things that losers don't want to do. Losers want to lay around in bed. Winners get up and go do something. It's time to start behaving like a winner. You want to behave like a winner. It's not fake it till you make it. It's behave your way to success. We'll take a break. Next, Tori says her dad has major anger issues and is constantly yelling and screaming at her younger brothers. She says it's gotten so bad that she had to call Department of Child and Family Service on her own father. We're going to talk about that after the break, and I have a good sneaking suspicion about why that anger is there. We'll be right back.
I can do more to lower my A1C. Because my body can still make its own insulin. And I take it once a week to activate my body to release it, like it's supposed to. Trulicity is not insulin. It starts acting in my body from the first dose and continues to work when I need 24/7. Trulicity is an injection to improve blood sugar in adults with type 2 diabetes when used with diet and exercise. Don't use it as the first medicine to treat diabetes, or if you have 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Don't take Trulicity if you or your family have medullary thyroid cancer, you're allergic to Trulicity, or have multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type. Stop Trulicity and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of a serious allergic reaction, a lump or swelling in your neck, or severe stomach pain. Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Trulicity with a sulfonylurea or insulin increases your low blood sugar risk. Common side effects include nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and decreased appetite. These can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems. I choose once weekly Trulicity to activate my within. If you need help lowering your A1C, ask your doctor about once weekly Trulicity.
Just about sleeps in her cape. But when we realized she was battling sensitive skin, we switched to Tide Pods Free and Gentle. It's gentle on her skin and dermatologist recommended. Tide Free, safe for skin with psoriasis and eczema. Abigail, we can escape to the north. I know there's a place we can be together. Across the border. Will you leave with me? Uncover the lost chapters of your family history with Ancestry. Get started for free at Ancestry.com.
It can be here and gone in a moment.
The tornado warning has been issued. We're seeing a clear signature of rotation.
So when severe weather sweeps through our community,
All of a sudden, my house shook them. A tree uprooted and fell on a house.
you can trust the expert meteorologists of Storm Center 7
It was moving at 65 miles per hour.
to keep you ahead of the storm.
Definitely need to be making sure that you are in your safe place.
Turn to Storm Center 7 for what coverage you can count on.
You know my law firm, Dyer, Groffelman & Schultz. We handle lots of auto accident cases, but you may not know that my firm handles all types of injury cases. If you're injured and need a lawyer, call 1-800-INJURED and get the Tiger on your.
The versatile Toyota Sienna looks, feels, and drives like all your favorite Toyotas rolled into one. Now get Super 60 financing on any new 2019 Sienna. $2,500 cash back. Toyota, let's go places.
My brother is not a good dad.
You want to say something? Spit it out.
Takes the kids to any of their activities, school, sports, Boy Scouts. Jeff and Tori's relationship is toxic. If they do talk, it's arguing and fighting. It's not a normal father-daughter relationship. My whole life, he made me feel like I wasn't good enough for him. My dad's relationship with my younger brothers is incredibly strange. Tyler and Kobe are scared of my dad. Both of them, on separate occasions, have told me that they think he hates them and that they hate him too.
Well, Tori says even though her dad lives in the same house for the past 16 years, he just ignores his children. He's refused to be part of their lives. His mother takes over that role. You're going to break the categories, right? You're setting up goals in different categories.
We are. You have not been showing up as a dad.
I know that.
And you're going to start showing up as a dad. And what is that to you?
Just doing more things with my kids, being a part of their life.
What type of dad are you looking for?
I'm looking for someone that's supportive, that actually wants to listen when everything going on. Somebody that
cares about what I did that day, you know? Doesn't have to be something spectacular, but I'd like you to at least check in and, hey, how was your day? How have you been doing? Without, by the end of the conversation, you asking me to come pick you up or to give you money or let you borrow my vehicle. Because I just feel like all you want to do when you interact with me is take. And instead of being genuinely interested, you just want something from me. Every single time you want something from me. It can never go from, hey, I'm glad you had a good day, let's talk tomorrow. It's, oh, hey, that sounds cool. Well, my friend's got weed out, a couple streets over from you. You want to come pick me up and take me out there? I'll find my own ride home.
Oh, I'm not like that. I don't want to be.
But why not? You've had every opportunity because you haven't been working, so you've had time to be really so hands-on. You could have coached their teams. You could have been at their schools. You could have been so involved as a father because of the time you've had, but instead you've totally unplugged. Why?
I don't know. I guess I just got depressed. I don't know what else it could have been. I just checked out and I don't know why.
We know in order for this to change, we have to get rid of. Right? And as long as you're still doing what you're doing, there's only two things that motivate people to change: pain and consequences. Consequences of change and emotional pain or physical pain. And what I want to do for you is also help you in this. I want to get you a coach. I want someone to focus working on with you daily, because unless you change, Jeff's going to have a really hard time changing.
Yeah, you two have become a unit, and it's a very dysfunctional unit. And we're going to talk about that new unit needs to look like right after the break. Today's show is almost over. We're going to hard at work on tomorrow's show and beyond. And we are always looking for great guests. Do you know the biggest enabler of the century? If you want them to their stage, be sure to log on to drphil.com and click Be on the Show or text Phil to 88500. We want to hear all about it. Closed captioning provided by
Pure Joy, Pure You.
You have reached the voicemail box of 937-532-4951. At the tone, please record your voice message. When you are finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
You have my telephone, girl?
Yeah, Mike, here's what I'm looking for out of you and your coaching team. I want to start out with a to-do list for each of them and a do list for each of them. There are some behaviors that need to be eliminated, and there are some new behaviors that need to be introduced. New behaviors like getting up, getting dressed, getting out of the house, getting on a bus, riding down to wherever is the target for that day, looking for jobs, going to the airport, doing whatever is necessary to make sure all certifications are current, doing whatever he has to do. Those are some of the things on the to-do list. And then the activities of daily living that you were talking about, the to-do list needs to include things like cleaning up the environment, cleaning up that room, cleaning up his relationship with the children, being honest with them. If it involves getting involved with a therapist, I'll be happy to provide that. There are a lot of things on the to-do list, and then the do list are just as important because you've gotten to the point that you've actually become abusive with your children. You yell at them, been anything but patient with your sons, correct? That anger boils out with them.
Right.
They didn't do anything to deserve that. That has to stop.
Yeah.
And then the same thing is true with you. You have to come up with a new set of rules to live by here.
Right.
And this is going to set you free.
Hopefully.
I mean, seriously, you have to decide that you're not helping him. You may think that you're doing this to help him, but you're not. You're doing this to make yourself feel better. Because at least you think, well, I don't want him on the street. I can't have my grandchildren on the street. So you're doing this to make yourself feel better. And you're doing it at the expense of, because necessity is the mother of invention, and he has no need to change because of what you're doing. Okay. Take that soft place to fall away from him. He will do better. Give yourself a break. This stuff about he lives in your house and won't even clean up after himself. Are you kidding me? Just the locks on the house.
I often find it's harder for someone like you to change than your son to change.
This is what you mean when you say best self. He's being his best self. She's not being her best self. And that's what you're talking about. And you're going to assign a coach to her.
I am.
And a coach to him. You're going to oversee them both. We're going to interact with each other, these two coaches. And we're going to behave our way to success with a plan set against a timeline. And you're going to check in and make sure what's going on.
Oh, we're going to be all over you. Both of you.
Okay, fair enough?
Yeah. Also, one more requirement that for us to work with you is there'll be drug testing at the house and you can smoke marijuana. You can smoke marijuana when you leave, and not I'm on top. You look a little concerned.
I'm not concerned.
You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to thank my guests today. A special thanks to Coach Mike Baird and Cass Simmers for providing these coaches that are going to get directly involved. His New York Times best-selling book is Best Self, Be You Only Better. And guess what? The entire audience is going home with their own copy. This is a really good book, and I promise you will. I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to read the book, and then you're going to give it to somebody else that you love to, because this is a very down-to-earth, action-oriented book. I particularly like the foreword in this book. Before I say goodbye, I want to remind you to subscribe to my podcast. It's called Fill in the Blanks. That's PHIL in the blanks. You can get it anywhere you can find podcasts. I get a chance to talk to people that I find real interesting in a fun and entertaining way. It's completely different than what you see here on the show, and I think it's going to give us a chance to share some time together in a really different way that's going to be both entertaining and informative. This is free. So all you got to do is push the subscribe button. You can listen to it audio when you're driving, walking, hanging out. Not you. Whatever. And you can find more information about my podcast at filintheblanks.com. Also, I have a new podcast series, Analytic Murder by Dr. Phil. And the first installment is called The Killer Thorn of Gypsy Rose. Don't forget, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you next time.
The WHIO TV app. It's absolutely free.
So what can we do for you today, Ivor? My client's been seriously injured. Now I'm just fear still.
Sorry, but as we always say, no pay.
Oh, really? Injured? Don't fight the insurance companies alone. The Tiger will fight to get you maximum cash in minimum time. Call 1-800-INJURED today and get the Tiger on your side.
Agency Fox 45 want to keep families safe this winter season. That's why we created Agency 22 Fox 45 Team Tornado. This spring, our meteorologists will be visiting schools in exquisite conditions that produce tornadoes and giving students hands-on storm preparedness tips. To see Team Tornado in action, watch our weekday newscasts April 22nd and May 17th. Jamie and I will show you which schools will get you special information about tornadoes and severe weather.
Brought to you by keeping you prepared and safe with Bible Hot News at 6:50.
Once upon a time, Lisa Marcho and Lawrence Gadenzi share a passion for cars and for family. They fell head over heels in love. Falling with launch this, launch that. It was going to be a perfect family. They were two lost souls coming together. But soon after they come together, these souls are ripped apart.
There was no sign of either one of them. They were just gone.
She said it's a murder case.
We were in shock. We didn't know what to say.
For this couple, the honeymoon is over. In the rural town of Lake Lando, just outside Richmond, Virginia,